joined now by another eminent scholar of the U.S. Of the Constitution, of constitutional law. Peter Shane is the Jacob E. Davis Chair in Law Emeritus at The Ohio State University and Distinguished Scholar in Residence at NYU School of Law. Professor Shane, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be with you.
I'm going to ask, in light of the discussion we just had with Jeffrey Stone, do we still have a democracy in the United States of America?
Democracy, as undoubtedly your exploration has revealed, is a remarkably kind of plastic term. Lots of different systems kind of fall within that umbrella. The question, I think, is not, are we a democracy, but what kind of democracy are we? And at the moment, we are, I would say, a fragile democracy. We are, there are still elements of electoral accountability, particularly at the state and local level, that seem to work. And, free speech has not been shut down. There's still rights of free assembly and petitions, so forth. So, things are not lost, but we are not the kind of strong democracy that we would have the resources to be if we had the political will to be that.
I ask that because, Jeff, in the last half hour, talked about infringements on First Amendment rights, including freedom of speech. My first guest today, Scott Sakayama, we were talking about immigration enforcement, and at least here in Chicago, there have been significant infringements on freedom of assembly and of demonstration of protest, right to protest. When I teach on this subject at Benedictine, I refer to that Supreme Court decision that put presidents above the law as meaning we no longer have the rule of law, because when there's the rule of law, by definition, nobody is above the law. So my question was motivated really by those realities. Obviously, you have concerns. I'm aware of that. So maybe I should change it to this. What do you see as the status of our Constitution right now? What's working, what's not?
Well, to a remarkable extent, the lower courts are working.
Yeah.
In terms of the federal judiciary, I think so much publicity is given to what's going on in the Supreme Court that it's overlooked that there have been, we have over 400 cases filed against the Trump administration. Judges in at least 37 states have found against the administration on a variety of issues. Those include judges appointed by Republican presidents, sometimes judges appointed by Donald Trump himself. And I think a lot of judges are trying to do as conscientious a job as is humanly possible, faced with often kind of unprecedented challenges. Having said that, I guess maybe one difference between my formulation and yours is that I kind of resist the off-on switch to, do we have a constitution? Do we have a democracy? We have a constitution that is, in significant respects, under assault. Yeah. In significant respects, its structure is not well suited to the kinds of democracy that we want to be and the kinds of challenges that we face. But it is not as if the courts are unimportant as kind of venues for resistance in the assertions of rights. And I don't think we should underestimate the tools that we have at our disposal.
I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Steve Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. Their first award-winning book was How Democracies Die. I think a part of their inspiration for some of their formulations came from someone who I read years ago as an undergraduate, Jane Mansbridge, about participatory democracy. In the end, the Constitution's words on paper, or ones and zeros on a screen, judges can issue interpretations, rulings, and orders. But in the end, does not our system depend on the people performing according to what those guidelines are? In other words, courts, there can be laws and court orders, as we have seen in Chicago, but when law enforcement does not enforce those orders, then the courts are, no matter what they're deciding, it seems to me, are quite weak. How do you see all of that, and put that in perspective?
I agree with you fundamentally that the role of the people, as you put it, is absolutely central to the strength of democracy. So the way the law evolves clearly reflects social movements, not always immediately, not always as fully as we might prefer. But if you look at what happened in the Supreme Court before the way the court had moved during the Warren Court, the Berger Court, even in the Rehnquist Court, you could see the movement.
Yeah.
You could see the impact of the labor movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, the consumer movement. Having people engage in giving meaning to the Constitution through the way they act, not just individually but collectively, is of central importance. And again, this is, and I think that what the Constitution means in effect over the next 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, is going to depend a lot on whether, for example, the kind of no kings reaction to the Trump administration evolves into something kind of more organized.
Yeah.
Whether you see people sort of defending what are kind of traditional venues for kind of collective dialogue across all kinds of party and tribal lines. I mean, I think one of the unfortunate sort of facts of life that we now face is that the right has been very alert to where dissent and conversation and democratic action can occur. It's not an accident that they're attacking universities.
Yeah.
They're also attacking public libraries.
And law firms.
And law firms. Mm-hmm. But, not everybody has access to a law firm.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody has access to a library.
Yeah.
And if you crack down on the librarians' ability to respond to people's curiosity, to facilitate conversations and debates among them, to provide them information in a kind of safe space for all kinds of democratic dialogue, that's a very dangerous thing. And the right wing knows it.
Yeah.
The question is whether progressives are going to act to defend it. Yeah,
it does depend on the people, right? I mean, it's the tactic of fascists and aspiring dictators throughout history. You go after the quote unquote, the voices of the people, right? Universities, media, lawyers, libraries, those that can lead in the provision of information and contesting information that's coming from leaders for accountability and transparency. I want to ask you, given your expertise in the court, on the Constitution and the court, what are the biggest cases pending before the court in the next session or a couple sessions, that concern you the most?
Well, I'm very concerned, although I guess I share in people's fatalism about a case called Trump versus Slaughter, which is I've written about this now for The Atlantic, Washington Monthly, and so forth. Where the court really has been following a program since at least 2013 of trying to reinterpret Article 2 of the Constitution in a way that enables what has come to be called this unitary executive theory. And this is really, and unitary executive theory comes in a lot of forms, but all of them accept as a premise that presidents are somehow constitutionally guaranteed the right to fire the heads of all federal agencies at will. This was a marginal view half a century ago.
Yep.
90 years ago, the Supreme Court unanimously rejected that idea in upholding the structure of the Federal Trade Commission. But since the Reagan administration, this has become a kind of target of the conservative legal movement. Mm-hmm. And I don't. And I guess I want to be clear here. I don't think that in the mind of everybody advancing this theory, they are necessarily connecting, I want this theory because it will help move the country in a right-wing direction. But I do think one of the reasons its appeal took off with the Reagan administration is because without the invention of some, and I'm using the word invention advisedly, without creating some meaning for the Constitution that gives the presidents power that is not accountable to Congress and the courts, then right-wing presidents, conservative presidents who want to undermine the regulatory state in particular wouldn't have the authority to do it. And Congress doesn't pass statutes that say the president hereby has authority to disassemble the national government as appropriate. That's not the way legislation is written. So you have presidents, again, trying to exercise power through agencies, and nothing would make it easier to do that with regard to the full scope of the executive establishment than the president's ability to fire people at will, especially when the Congress and the Senate in particular is just supine and kind of sitting on its hands when it comes to really vetting appointees for genuine qualifications.
Right. Yeah. And it seems to me that that case, I see the beginning of the court's damage to our system is perhaps being with Citizens United, which really, to my eyes, fused money and politics, money in electoral politics and money in government in to levels that had not been seen before in a long time in this country, if ever. And if this decision goes for the administration, and I agree with you, I see that it will. A friend of mine messaged me before saying that the moneyed class is done with letting elected representatives of their lowest paid employees place limits on their own behavior or to tax them. And it seems like this case might be the culmination of that descent into plutocracy or kleptocracy here. And
I think to sort of go back to your point about the relevance of the people and really the relevance of politics, we focus on since I teach law for a living, obviously I'm focusing on what the courts do, but what has enabled or facilitated or given rise to the kind of legal developments that we've seen over the last 25, 30 years is as much a result of legislative decisions to deregulate banking, decisions that have enabled the amassing of, limitless fortunes, really. It really is
limitless, right? Yeah.
And I think when you have a single human being who has command over, the kind of budget that would have pretty much been the federal budget of 1789, but the single individual is not divided into three branches checking and balancing one another.
Right.
They're not responsible to the electorate in any way. You do have a very dangerous situation, and I have to say, one of the again great misfortunes of politics, but I always say this, is that inertia favors the bad guys.
Yep.
which is to say that if people are not. If people don't care,
yep.
and there are lots of reasons why just the pressures of everyday life and the need not to follow politics with every second of one's life, these things are going to divert people's attention. But the people who have billions of dollars to defend, they're paying attention, and if there are no speed bumps put in their way, you will see a continued erosion of the realm of domestic life, and I don't mean home life, I mean domestic within the United States life, that people will be able to control through elected representatives.
And when people like them are taxed at 1% and people like me are taxed at 30%, and we have a deficit, their response is cut spending, right? Not tax them. And so things become worse and worse, and then the average person is so focused on paying their most basic bills that going to the streets to try to change things becomes more and more difficult. Do you think, Peter, that we've reached a when in the course of human events moment? I'm you had the family optimist on the phone, so I guess I would say put somebody else on. You're talking to Dr. Gloom and Doom, apparently. That's what the people here call me.
Yeah. So no, I don't think we are there, but I do think we need to evolve, new local institutions that protect really, what economists would call public goods.
Yeah.
I mean, and among the public goods are information, reporting, the ability, education, basically the people of the ability of communities to, again, gather, form, a kind of collective judgment as to the direction of their community, and hold their elected officials accountable to make sure that happens. We have all of the technologies, and many of the technologies that are now being used to suppress dissent don't have to be that way. We have the capacity for dialogue online. You could have public hearings when people, even the person who has to stay home and take care of their child, or somebody who's disabled, they could participate in the hearing.
Good.
But you have to insist on it. You have to insist that there be opportunities for voices to be heard.
It seems to me, though, it sort of gets back to what we were talking about before. This extremist deregulation has allowed this incredible concentration, not just of wealth, but of corporate power, right? What are there, 5 media owners? Now it's about to be 4. Even on the internet, if you consider the power of Meta and Google, and I guess X, although I hate to even say that, right? That the ability to control information is so extreme that I think it makes the exercise of First Amendment rights difficult, certainly puts them at grave risk. And I wonder, I see the return of Trump to power, right? A 30-plus times convicted felon to power, someone who fomented an attack on the Capitol to try to carry out a coup to remain in power when he had lost a Democratic election. I see that as evidence that the structures in the Constitution that worked for so long no longer meet the needs of this society, this technology, our civilization today. And Pete Buttigieg recently articulated a similar idea that if and when we get through this, there's going to have to be changes made to how we do things in our system. And I wonder, A, if you agree with that, and B, like, if you do, could you name a few of the major, most significant changes that you see would help to restore, the realization of the truths we're supposed to hold to be self-evident.
Yeah. It's the holiday season, so I can wish for gifts, right?
Yeah.
Right. so in that spirit, I do think in terms of, well, let me just say one thing that could be done straightforwardly under existing procedures without any kind of extra cute manipulation of the system is you could get in every state a movement to award the state's electoral votes for president only to somebody who actually wins 51% of the vote in that state. Now, that might mean that the states will have to have runoffs or use ranked choice voting or something. But Hillary Clinton would have been president in 2016. Al Gore would have been president in 2000. If we had that kind of situation, but instead you had, the entirety of a state's electoral votes going to somebody who won just barely, if at all, a plurality vote. So that's something easy. In terms of amending the Constitution, a thing, over a decade ago, I published my draft of a pro-democracy constitutional amendment. And you may have noticed that this did not cause a popular movement. But it's possible to amend the Constitution to make voting a federal right, to provide federal protection against gerrymandering to ensure actually competitive elections, which would certainly help undermine a too complacent political establishment. It would authorize, public funding for elections. It would authorize controls on the amount of money that can be spent on elections. Again, all of that could be done to replace, the Supreme Court's less helpful decisions with a different set of constitutional rules.
Maybe a federal paid holiday, or move the elections to a Saturday. And even then, I think it would still have to be a lot of people work on Saturday, so I think it needs to be a federal paid holiday.
I'm all for that, but I think protecting the integrity of mail-in voting is just essential.
Oh yeah.
So.
You can do both.
I don't want to say. I mean, it's not necessarily universally true that if the current president opposes something, it's a good thing to have. But certainly, it's the case with mail-in voting. I think a big test for the court. You asked before about major cases in the coming term. Obviously, a very big one is going to be about birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
And I do think. I think Trump's going to lose.
Do you?
I do think that. And I think he's going to lose. Well, I think the law is, entirely against his position.
Oh, yeah.
Putting aside, what the Constitution means, although that's, I think, incontrovertible, Congress by statute has implemented Section 1 of the 14th Amendment by calling for birthright citizenship. So it's a statutory right as well as a constitutional right. It would take legal reasoning as bad as Dred Scott for Trump to win. Now, and what I want to say about that is I think he's going to lose, and I think the court is, I think the justices in their heart of hearts or whatever, think that this is a way of showing that they're not just kind of in the tank for this administration. If I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, you beat me to the question. Yeah.
If I am wrong about that, and again, I try not to be an alarmist, but I would just say I think that's the end of the Supreme Court. I don't think that there's I think the movement for changing the court structure and authority would just be overwhelming. It would be as bad an opinion as Dred Scott.
Huh. You have more optimism in the... I didn't think you were going to go in that direction. I mean, I think it would be the end of the Supreme Court because it would render itself irrelevant, but I think it would be the consolidation of dictatorship in the United States of America.
I really think that people would not stand for it, and the other thing to be said, and the Constitution does have a mechanism for amendment.
Yep.
We've come very close to having a sort of right-wing call for a convention to require a balanced budget and so forth. But I think would be an incredibly important piece of legislation, because we don't have this in place now. We don't have any set of rules for what a convention would be. And I think that's a lot of people who agree profoundly with the need for constitutional change are worried about a convention because they have no idea what it would entail, and they know what kinds of resources the right has to organize in terms of money, and it's not irrational to be frightened. I think if we could have a set of rules about the way in which the members of the convention would be chosen, how votes would be taken, the whole gamut, that we could have a convention that would truly be an expression of authentic democracy, and not just a kind of factional cabal.
The reason, the paradox, obviously, of that is, if we had such consensus on rules, on norms, on participation, on those sorts of things, then you wouldn't need the convention that you're talking about. And I don't see how you get that convention given the fundamental splits that we see, whether that's people who are acting in their own self-interest or have been deceived to think that things that are against their interests are for them. But I'm encouraged by your optimism. We can hope that the court behaves responsibly, or as sort of sees the light, as it were. We have to go to break. Professor Shane, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a delight talking to you, and hope we get the chance to do so again, perhaps at greater length. Thank you so much. And Happy New Year to you.
You're very welcome. Happy New Year to you as well.